Surprise, surprise. Arch was right. Such a shocking turn of events, I know. A real twist, and yet here we are once again. As a few days ago, I made a video on Homeworld 3. What went wrong with it? Specifically referring to the story, which a majority of the fans, judging by the game's Steam user review score, found to be very, very disappointing. Not very well written, poorly executed, poorly delivered, and most crucially of all, not a Homeworld story at all. In the video, I presented my arguments and the evidence, which admittedly was circumstantial, that this was primarily due to the interference of Gearbox Interactive and their managing director of narrative properties, Lynn Joyce. And since then, the article, the interview with Lynn Joyce that I mentioned repeatedly in the video, has been deleted from the game company's website. Furthermore, any mention of me or my video, any linking to it on the official Steam Discord or their forums, appears to mysteriously be deleted outright immediately. Now, I would argue that that is evidence, at the very least, of a guilty conscience, if nothing else. But we need not even make such circumstantial evidence any further, because in the video, I basically made the argument that all of the changes, like the heavy focus on characters, the constant close-ups, the very diverse cast, etc., well, they all coincided very neatly with a certain real-world ideology that the managing director of narrative properties appeared to subscribe to. But now, we no longer need to make these leaps of logic. We have a Datamined cutscene, which shows a later mission in the game, suggesting the story was largely done in this style, which demonstrates a very different presentation, a very different style overall, and a very different plot as well, as there is no mention at all of the incarnate queen. Instead, there are mentions of precursor technology and of sajuuk. You know, Homeworld things. Weird. Why would anyone want Homeworld things in a Homeworld game? Wouldn't it be far better to have a mysterious magical space empress that nobody has heard of doing things that nobody thought was possible with hyperspace technology, seemingly circumventing all of the established rules for hyperspace in the universe, including hyperspace inhibitors? Well, again, judging by the audience's reactions, no, not really. And this coincides also, the idea that this was done later in development, with the drastic changes in the trailers too, which I showed off in the preceding video, where there was a trailer that looked Homeworld-esque, and then a trailer after the appointment of the managing director of narrative properties that did not look like a Homeworld trailer. It seems as if the majority of the game was already done, a lot of the story was done, even some of the voice acting was in fact done, and then drastic changes were introduced. And what changes? Well, let me play the cutscenes side by side so you can see. Now, one of the big things is the focus on all of the characters, the incredibly diverse cast, the constant close-ups, they're gone. Instead, the style is far more Homeworld-esque. Now, bear in mind, this could simply be for cost-saving measures, as a basic sketch kind of thing, but it's also shot in black and white, which I like to believe would have been a conscious choice, because that is, of course, very Homeworld-esque, and it is also a lot shorter, a lot less bloat, a lot less focus on this epic story that the writers and the managing director of narrative properties primarily seemingly wanted to tell in that, now deleted article. Sus, very sus indeed. Instead, it's simply just a quick, simple, old-school Homeworld cutscene, which seems to suggest a frankly better game, as a lot of the problems with Homeworld 3 was that there was a lot of story. This was indeed a villain with a lot to say, as mentioned in that aforementioned deleted article, but none of it made a whole lot of sense. None of it was very Homeworld-esque, and none of it was very in-universe either, nor was it a particularly compelling story. It's like, oh, I will liberate you from the burden of free will. Okay, Ultron, okay, every villain the last 15 years, this is not interesting. And whilst the whole idea that there could have been a heavy focus on the two main characters, whose names are so forgettable I've already wiped them from memory essentially, that could have been interesting. You know, how would getting connected with the mothership change a person? How would her mind evolve, her personality, her perspective, her view on things? Well, that never actually happened. Her interactions with her intel officer never really changed or evolved either. Like all of these high-flying ideals that a PhD in writing might get you never actually manifested in the game, even though they pumped up the runtime by quite some margin. This then, in my opinion, is fairly firm evidence now that the story was changed drastically at a fairly late date. As here we have, again, a late mission. It's got the cutscenes, it's got the storyboard, essentially. It's even got some voice acting. It has had a lot of work put into it, and then we see a drastically different story that takes elements of the old one, but replaces them, puts in a hell of a lot more close-up shots, a hell of a lot more of a diverse cast, and a female villain, which just so happens to be incredibly powerful, a mind-breaking, groundbreaking villain, but also who's actually misunderstood, who isn't actually that bad of a girl, you see. She just, she had some issues, can't really blame her for enslaving an enormous portion of the galaxy, or massacring billions of people via unceasing orbital bombardments or anything like that. You know, it's a bit of a misunderstanding, all of it, really. You see, she was in pain. Yes. That was it. That was why she deserved a nice sentimental send-off, ascending up into heaven instead of, eating a bullet in a bunker somewhere or something, like other historical equivalents of this character's actions. Oh, who am I kidding? The Austrian painter killed a hell of a lot fewer people than the incarnate queen did. Yes, it seems almost certain now these were changes made by Gearbox Interactive by the issuing of the directives of the managing director of narrative properties interfering with Blackbird Interactive. Now, mind you, that is not a defense of Blackbird Interactive. They claim to have full creative control. Now, either they lied, in which case, fuck them, or two, they chose to listen to a person who would radically change their story into something that Homeworld never was and never should have been. Either way, they're both guilty of the absolute mess that they eventually created of Homeworld 3. And, from my point of view, I'm just glad to see that my speculation has now been thoroughly and absolutely proven. And incidentally, I also want to thank everybody who sent me their feedback on this as well, who sent me the articles and who sent me the various pieces of information. This could not have been done without all of you. Thank you very, very much. And screw Blackbird and Gearbox. Now, there is still potentially a salvaging of Homeworld 3, mind you. They could make an entirely different campaign as a kind of expansion, and maybe make that an actual Homeworld story. Along with continued support of the game, there might still be a path forward, but after a betrayal 20 years in the making, you're really going to pull something magnificent out of the hat here to cool the embers of distrust and dislike that you have so skillfully nurtured within the community. As, hey, the base gameplay, although again a mechanical downgrade from previous games, is still relatively good. It was all just really badly ruined by the story, as Homeworld, first and foremost, as you were told during your Fig Kickstarter campaign as well, is of a narrative focus. It is the idea of receiving a good story first, and then working in a random roguelite mod much later, of exceedingly secondary concern. Even more secondary than all of your pre-planned DLC, I guess, and your battle passes and season passes. As I mentioned, they're going to have a long and hard road ahead of them to re-win the trust of the community on this one, I think. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I do hope to see you all again soon. And remember, Arch is always right. Have a good day.